All right. Welcome to today's show. So, is strategy going to make it on the S&P 500? I'm going to talk about that today and where they need to close at the end of June, which is coming up. And what happens if they get on the S&P 500? What does it mean for the actual stock? What does it mean for those who hold MSTR? And what is the possibility of billions of dollars flowing into this actual stock, which would be huge? Automatic buys coming in like clockwork for strategy if they get on the S&P 500. When would that actually happen? What are the dates that would happen? And that could be very good news. So remember, in this show, not tax advice, not financial advice, not legal advice. And we're going to jump in and rock and roll today. So Tom Lee's bold prediction. He says, as Bitcoin goes up, strategy goes up a lot more. Well, that's no secret to all of us who are following strategy, but Tom Lee is actually a really good guy. There was a video I posted on my Instagram today where Tom Lee was interviewed back in 2020 on the news. And while he was on the news with this news person in 2020, he was like, we're recommending that people allocate 1 to 2% of their portfolios into Bitcoin. This was 5 years ago. He said this, and the newscaster was like, "Really? That sounds insane. Like 1 to 2%, I could get if somebody was wealthy, they would allocate 1 to 2% of their money into Bitcoin. But for somebody to put 1 to 2% of their portfolio in there, that's crazy." And this was a newscaster like really going over the top on this back in 2020, and Tom Lee in 2020. He called it. He said 1 to 2% before Larry Fink said 2, 3 to 5% in your portfolio of Bitcoin. So Tom Lee, bold predictions. Strategy owns 592,000 Bitcoin. Bitcoin goes up. Strategy stock jumps even faster. That's what we're all waiting for and looking for. Strategy hit about 392, 393 today. I'm personally looking for strategy to push through at about 400 or 405, 420 for it to push through, squeeze out a bunch of the short positions, and then go to new all-time highs is my goal for strategy, or to at least go up much higher. So Tom Lee believes MSTR could outperform Bitcoin itself, of how tightly it's tied to the cryptocurrency. We all know this. This is not new news, but the genius of the 4242 plan is Michael Saylor has a master plan to raise $84 billion by 2027. So that's the aggressive plan, to raise $84 billion by 2027. Strategies on the move and doing that. It's called the 4242 plan. You've all heard this before. They are issuing preferred stock like Stride and Strife and Strike. And these are one of the ways that they're doing it to raise money to buy more Bitcoin. They're also issuing convertible bonds, which is another way with almost no interest cost to buy more Bitcoin. It's like borrowing money smartly to buy something you truly believe in, and this is Bitcoin. So with all of that, why the debt doesn't scare a bunch of analysts. You know, you hear in the papers or you hear in the news people saying strategy's got so much debt and it's risky what they're doing, and do they know what they're doing? But look at their situation, $63 billion in Bitcoin. Only $11.6 billion in debt. That is a healthy balance sheet, which means they may get added to the S&P 500, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. So TD Cohen says, which is an analyst of a large institution, says this is very safe. They've given MSTR a buy rating with a price target of 590. So right now, MSTR is currently at 392. If it goes to 590, you do the math. What is that? A 70% gain from here or so. That would be a very nice gain, and it would be nice if it went even higher in 2025. So the Bitcoin arms race is on. We've got ProCap BTC, Anthony Pompliano's company. They just beat GameStop's Bitcoin holdings. ProCap now owns 4,932 Bitcoin. 532 million. So many treasury companies are getting the game. This is just proof that this asset is on fire and Bitcoin is just taking the world by storm. More good news from Saylor in a moment of what just happened with Bitcoin also as of the last day or so. So I'll tell you about that in a moment. And the race is on to acquire as many Bitcoin as possible, says Pompliano. But MSTR is still number one. And as we see other companies like Metaplanet and Palm's company and other companies springing up, MSTR is still the king. It's still the leader. It is still far above. It is still the only contender for the S&P 500 out of any of these Bitcoin treasury companies. So Saylor's leverage game, we know what he's doing. He's using the preferred. He's using converts and not diluting the shares. How many weeks in a row has it been? 5, 6, 7 weeks or so. I think it's been about 6 weeks where he hasn't used or issued any common shares. So this is good as well. And the rare combo, massive Bitcoin exposure plus smart financial engineering. This makes MSTR super attractive. Who's attracted to MSTR? Retail investors are attracted. Institutions are definitely attracted. We've got BlackRock has over a 5% stake in MSTR. So owns 5% of MSTR shares. And then, of course, people are interested in MSTR high leverage Bitcoin bulls. That would be me. I am one of those people. So will Bitcoin hold the line to join the S&P 500? What needs to happen? Let's jump in and talk about this a little bit. What needs to happen for Bitcoin for strategy to hit the S&P 500? And what does it mean for you and Bitcoin? So first off, the S&P 500, most of you probably know this, but it's a list of the top 500 biggest and most important companies in America, like Apple, Amazon, Google are on it. So when you get added to a list like this, like Coinbase just did, you get more respect, you get more investors, and billions of dollars flow into your stock from index funds. But not every company gets in. So what are the actual rules to see whether or not strategy is going to qualify for the S&P 500? The likelihood is very high, and I'm going to break down a few things here from my research on it. So there's the 4 big boxes that strategy needs to check to get on the S&P 500. First and foremost, check box number 1. Is strategy a U.S. company? Check the box. They are a U.S. company. That is the first requirement to be on the S&P 500. They check that freaking box. Box number 2, must be worth at least $18 billion in terms of the market cap. Strategy has a much larger market cap. So strategy checks that box. And I'm going to look up that datum again because it seems low. But in any case, there you go. And then most of the shares must be available for people to trade. So that's called public float. And strategy qualifies here too for that, where the shares are available to trade, where anybody can buy those shares. And here's the big one. The big one is it must be profitable in the most recent quarter. Okay, so this is the kicker. It must be profitable in the most recent quarter. So when strategy ends this quarter, let's say we end at $107,000 Bitcoin, which we've been hovering around, strategy would end and have a profitable quarter. Even if we end at $95,000 Bitcoin, strategy would have a profitable quarter. But it goes on like this. This is where it gets tricky. Overall, they must be profitable in the last 4 quarters. So if you look at strategy over the last 4 quarters, quarter 3 of 2024, they had a loss. Quarter 4 of 2024, a loss. And Q1 of 2025, I think it was about a $4.2 billion reported loss. Okay. Now, going into Q2 2025, which is right now ending in June. So Monday, I believe, is the last day of the month. So this will be the end of Q2 in 2025. The reports will be out in late July 2025. And so they've had 3 losing quarters in a row. That's what's happened. But this 4th quarter, they should report over like $10 billion in unrealized gains. And when they report those gains, it'll wash out the losses over the last 3 quarters. And then if you average over all those 4 quarters, they now will have come out profitable in terms of their being a profitable company. And so they would check that box of not just being profitable in Q4 or in Q2, but they would check the box of also being profitable in over the sum of those 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Makes sense? The last 4 quarters. And so it looks highly probable that strategy will check the box and will meet all the requirements to be added into the S&P 500. So that is the basic idea, and that is how it works. And strategy right now is at 592,000 Bitcoin. If they close around $95,000, so let's say something happened tomorrow and over the weekend and Monday, and strategy dropped, or Bitcoin dropped from 107 to 95,000. If they close around 95,200, 95,300, they still will have been profitable and have posted a profit over the last 4 quarters and still would be eligible for the S&P 500. That would make their Bitcoin gains look huge on paper. Okay? So, when would they be added? That's the other question. The S&P 500 committee reviews new companies every quarter, usually in March, June, and September. So since strategy will close out their second quarter at the end of June, it's likely the committee would review in September. Well, they will review companies in September, and that strategy would be admitted to the S&P 500. So they would be voted in early September 2025. And how cool would that be? Because assuming we're still in a bull run, which I believe we are and know we are, and assuming that we're going to have a nice run at the end of the year, if strategy gets added to the S&P 500 in September, where typically we see peak seasons, and again, the models have changed, the times have changed, who knows when we're going to see it, but typically you'll see peak seasons in October, November, December at the end of a bull run. And so if the bull run is happening and then strategy gets added to the S&P 500, that would add fuel to the fire and excitement and energy, and not to mention billions of dollars within months coming into strategy. That's pretty freaking cool, right? I mean, that's really, really freaking cool. So super good news, super cool. And when the fireworks really begin, what happens if they get in? Well, tons of mutual funds, retirement accounts, ETFs that track the S&P 500 will be forced to buy strategy shares. So literally, it's a forced buy. So all your, friends who are not in the Bitcoin game, all your friends who don't even know what strategy is. You mentioned strategy. You're like, what strategy? Who's got a good strategy? I want to learn about strategy. They don't even know what the company is. They think it's just the word strategy. They never even heard of it before, half of them. Okay. And so you've got a whole group of people who don't know what strategy is at all. You got a whole group of people who've heard of Bitcoin but don't understand it. And if strategy gets added to the S&P 500, they will indirectly be forced to buy it by automatic, just passive buying of people buying the S&P 500, and a portion of that gets allocated to strategy, and they're buying strategy and indirectly buying Bitcoin, and they don't even know it. And wouldn't that be a fun thing at your next Thanksgiving holiday to sit across the table and somebody starts saying Bitcoin this and Bitcoin that and Bitcoin that, and go, hey, do you own the S&P 500 in your portfolio? Of course I do. It's the top companies like Amazon and Apple and blah, blah, blah. Well, you now own Bitcoin, my friend. Wouldn't that be a nice right there at the table, huh? That would be pretty fun. So that could happen. Likelihood is there. Now, of course, it has to be approved by a vote. So we will see if the vote lets them in. And but they certainly do check the boxes. They certainly do check the boxes. So analysts estimate that you'll have this index flow, right? This flow of money that goes into the index. And analysts estimate 15 billion could flow into strategy over the next year. That's a lot of money. Talking about a company whose market cap is about $104 billion. And so with 60 something billion dollars of Bitcoin. And so $15 billion flowing in to buy the stock, that's a lot. That is a lot. Okay. So, and 5 to 10 billion of that could come in the first couple months, which is huge. So that is a tsunami of money. And guess what? That drives the stock price even higher and brings even more attention to Bitcoin. So why does this matter? Because if you own strategy or Bitcoin, you're not just betting on price, you're betting on a shift. You got a shift in money. Who would have thought? S&P 500 buys, passive flows just coming in to buy strategy and indirectly buying Bitcoin. Who would have thought there would be a shift in power like this, a shift in what people are trusting? I mean, it would be big, big news if strategy got added on. Now, Coinbase got added on, but it's a different game if strategy gets added in. Coinbase doesn't have Bitcoin in their reserves. So it would be a big deal, and we would all be happy. So again, here's the bottom line. Strategy checks all the boxes. 3 out of 4 boxes right now to be approved. They need to be profitable in Q2. Pending that we don't have like a world war in the next 4 days, I think in Q2, at the end of this quarter, they're going to be profitable and they're going to check the boxes, and then it all comes down to a vote, which is cool. Again, we want Bitcoin closing to get above $95,000. I don't think there's a chance that Bitcoin's going to close below 95,000 in the next couple of days. And S&P votes in early September, as I said. And if accepted, they would be initiated into the S&P 500 around September 20th. And you're looking at 15 to $20 billion potentially flowing into strategy. So that is the news. That is the weather. That's the sports. And that's what's going on with strategy, which is pretty good freaking news, right? I like it. What do you guys think? Pretty cool. What do you think? The Cryptothon, Knox Bill. What do you guys think? Pretty good. So it's good. You know, so somebody's asking here always in the rough says, why is the volume down with strategy? Why doesn't seem like it's outperforming Bitcoin? You know, it's been sideways for months now, right? We've been watching this. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens when the shorts get liquidated. Let's see what happens if that drives the price up, which I think it will. There are people shorting the stock. There's 10% of all the outstanding shares are being shorted right now. And so let's see what happens. And the kind of base, last I looked on this a week ago, so I got to update my figures, but the kind of base, like, you know, level of like, we don't really want to go below 365. If we start going below 365, we could drop much lower. But right now it's holding at a healthy like 385, 392 it went up to today. So we got to break through that 400 level, 395 and 400 as short positions, and liquidate those suckers and then rise up. And then hopefully we'll have a run here. Let's get a damn run for Bitcoin. Bitcoin needs to go to $120. I think we're all just sitting around like, come on, move your ass. There's enough good news in the world right now that's happening. There's all kinds of good news coming about Bitcoin. There's more kinds of Bitcoin treasury companies coming in and buying more Bitcoin. It's like, dude, we need to move, right? We need to move. It's been stable at 107. Bitcoin needs to break through 108. That's the resistance level. It needs to bust through 108 and then bust through 112. And then I think we'll go to 120. So that's what we're looking at. That is what we're looking at in the game. And damn it, let's go, man. And let's see strategy do a run and melt faces and get that volatility back that we all know and love, because that's what we're looking for. That's why we own the stock. So I believe we will see it again. I think we just need to be a little bit patient here. Again, I bought into the stock. First time in 2020, I bought into the stock, but really bought into the stock in 2024 and put lots of money in 2024. And I've watched periods like this where it just lulls. It just lulls. And we're in another period like that. So we're going to break out. That's my prediction. Not tax advice, not financial advice, not legal advice. Do your own research. But that's what I think is going to happen. Okay. So with all of that, Jeff Waltons always does great and he's a great analyst of stuff. He says there's a 91% chance MSTR qualifies. That was as of a couple days ago. It's more like at this point, it's higher. And what else can we see here? You know, here's the risks, right? Where you could get sell-offs of Bitcoin, where in the next 4 days, we could have risks of sell-offs and panic and volatility because of all the Iran-Israel tensions that are pushing Bitcoin below 100,000 like we saw a week ago. I don't think we're going to see that in the next 4 or 5 days. So I do think strategy is going to hit the S&P 500 qualifications, checking all the damn boxes, and they should be voted in. It would be good for the financial system. It would be good for the world. It'd be good for trust in Bitcoin. It would be good for the future of finance if they get voted in. If they don't get it voted in, that would be a crock of shit if you ask me. So they better get voted in, okay? So Saylor's strategy depends on Bitcoin's long-term trend, not short-term panic. Strategy is already in the NASDAQ 100, as you know, so they're already getting automatic buys as a result of that. And now if they move to the S&P 500, that's good freaking news, all right? So we covered all this stuff already. So we covered all this. So the post from Saylor, the winning strategy is Bitcoin. If you zoom in on this, I have to zoom in on this damn thing to see it, but you look 100 and it's something like 168 or 180 versus Bitcoin's returns over the last year, which are, what is that? 76%. So strategy, still zoom out and look at the returns over the last year. They're still crushing it. And comparatively to Bitcoin, they're moving up at a factor of 2x to Bitcoin. So we now need to look and see what happens over the next 6 months. Okay. All right. So this is a, we're not going to get, oh, well, actually, this is interesting because I'm going to pull this closer so I can see and read this to you guys. But yeah, so Bitcoin has been recognized as a real asset by the U.S. housing system. So you can now use Bitcoin as collateral, and which is a big deal, right? It's recognized as a reserve asset by the U.S. housing system now. So that's a big deal. So if you want to go get a loan for a house, they're going to treat Bitcoin as real collateral, which is pretty freaking cool. And Sailor saying take compound. There you go, Sailor. Superhero image of himself. Compound B, there it is. Compound B. Chris Mueller says Bitcoin is a monopoly on money. Strategy is a monopoly on Bitcoin. Yes, we know this is fantastic. And Max Kaiser says this is a Sputnik moment where nations around the world race to accumulate Bitcoin. And Michael Saylor says, congratulations. Future generations will remember this as the moment Bitcoin entered the American dream. So it's pretty cool that you can actually now use Bitcoin as collateral when you go to buy a house. So that's dope as well. And then this is just a shows you the different preferred stocks that Strategy has out in the marketplace. So if you look at the different ones, you've got Strike, which is orange down here, and you got about $1 billion out in the marketplace. And then you look at the graph on Strife, which is the yellow, and you got, what is that, $2 billion or plus. And then you've got Stride, the new one, which you've got over $3 billion in terms of the value of the outstanding preferred securities they have, preferred stock. So that's what's going on in the world. So in summary, will Strategy get added to the S&P 500? And my vote on this thing is by the end of the month, which is in a few days, Strategy will check all the freaking boxes. And I believe that in September, they're going to get added to the S&P 500. I think when the vote comes and they look at this, because the quarter will end in June, in July, they'll then report their earnings. They'll come out with, they had a $4 billion loss in last quarter. Then they had like 400 million, 300 million. I'm just giving you rough figures the quarters before. And so their total loss is like 5 billion or so over those 4 quarters. And so when they come out with a 10 billion or $12 billion report on unrealized gains, like boom, they're going to be in the profit in this quarter. They're going to be in the profit over the rolling 4 quarters. And as Bitcoin picks up steam over the next 4 to 5 months, and more companies are adopting Bitcoin into their treasury and treasury strategies for adding Bitcoin, we're going to see a whole change in the planet, a whole change in the world, and we're going to see more and more confidence going into Bitcoin. And I think at that point, when the S&P board votes on this thing, I think they're going to check the box and say, boom, strategy's on. And then we get billions and billions coming. So this is good news. All right. So I hope you guys are doing fantastic. Pray for rain. Pray for Strategy getting added to the freaking S&P 500. It would just be a great news for us to end the quarter with a win like this. And then let's get a damn run up. Okay. Let's put our decisions on there that Bitcoin's going to break through 108 and 112 and shoot up to 120. And for Strategy, if that happens, if that's what, a 12, 13% move in Bitcoin, that'd be like a 12% move in Bitcoin. So let's then pray for a 24% move on Strategy and put that there. All right. Hope you guys are doing well. Have a great rest of the day. When I end the stream, if you would like the channel, share it with somebody else. And I would appreciate that, or subscribe if you haven't. And I will see you sometime either tomorrow or over the weekend. Have a great day.